Want to talk a little bit about growing dill today, and this is the last set of dill that I grew. This one is from a couple weeks back, just getting started, getting established, and coming in very nicely. Watering from the bottom up, as you can see that. And I keep it covered because of, not because of insects, but because I have squirrels in the neighborhood here and rabbits, and they love to dig around in here. So I got to keep these covered or else they just mess up the seedlings. But let's go over to the edge of the garden here, and I'm going to talk to you about this other dill that's over at the far end here. So I grow most of my dill for dill dressing, for salmon cooking, for the herbs and spices, and then also for a big portion of it for my pickling cucumbers. Since I grow a lot of cucumbers, I go ahead and I like to have the dill for the making the pickling cucumbers. But this dill here is quite established and doing really well. I keep it right by the fruit tree, the pear tree that I'm having problems with a lot of insects, and it helps kind of deter a lot of the insects, so I keep it in that area. So if you have fruit trees or cabbage plants in the area, it's a good idea to keep your dill growing in that area, as long as, of course, you're in a full sun area. So let me tell you a little bit about what dill is. Now, dill is both a herb and a spice. The herb itself is for the greeny leafy pieces here that you can use to make like dill sauce for salmon or dressings. You can use it for pickling cucumbers, and you can use it for chicken and other things. But I love growing herbs, and so dill is one of the things that I do grow. And I use quite a bit of mine for, of course, pickling cucumbers. Now, you can also use it for soups and stews. I haven't used that too much for those two items, but I know some people do grow it for making soups and stews. Now, I like to grow my dill in succession growing. What that basically means is every 2 to 3 weeks, I go ahead and start a new pot of dill, just because I want to have fresh dill commonly growing throughout my garden on a regular basis. And so when I start canning my pickles, my cucumbers to make pickles, and then I also start using the dressing, I like to be able to come out to the garden and just go ahead and pick off however many sprigs that I need for the time being. And it's always nice to have a new crop of dill growing on a regular basis. Now, the reason why I have this dill close to the pear tree is because it attracts a lot of beneficial insects. And as I told you before, I've had some problems here on my pear tree. It's looking okay right now, but from time to time I get quite a few bugs coming around here and chewing on the leaves and spreading diseases. So I've made it a point to move this largest dill plant close to the pear tree. Now, a little bit about starting from seed. It's a good idea to start your dill in its final resting home. So whether you're using a raised bed, or you're using pots, or you're going to go ahead and sow directly into the ground, dill doesn't do a very good job of transplanting, just because of the nature of the root system and how leggy it can possibly get. And so it's best to be sowed directly into its final resting home. So I went ahead and took my dill seeds from the prior season, and I went ahead and I scattered them inside this 18-inch pot. Now, I do a lot of bunch growing with my herbs. Instead of kind of spreading it out, I go ahead and throw quite a few extra seeds in there. As you can see, it's pretty jam-packed in there. And it kind of helps support each other. We get a little bit of wind here in the Northwest from time to time, even in the summertime. And so it's really a good idea to help kind of support each other, because I don't want to sit here and stake it, and I don't want it falling down all the time. And so I just do a lot of bunch growing when it comes to my herbs. Now, although dill does like slightly acidic soil, somewhere in the kind of the 5.5 to to the 6.7 range, it can handle neutral pH soil. So 7 is perfectly fine. And even if you have a little bit more alkaline soil and it's a little bit above 7, that's okay. When it comes to herbs, and especially things like dill, it can handle soil pHs that are, slightly acidic to slightly alkaline, and it'll grow regardless. And I don't really do much to amend my soil. Of course, I have a lot of good potting mix soil, so I use that. But even if I had poor soil, dill, like many herbs, do still grow really well even in poor soil. But if you want to get off to a really good start, use the proper soil. So if you're going to do grow your dill in a raised bed, go ahead and start off with fresh raised bed soil. And if you're going to do what I did and grow them in pots, go ahead and get fresh potting mix. Now I went ahead and put this little basket on the outside of it because I just go ahead and I basically water from the bottom up. So I just go ahead and do that and just water it like that. Now I don't water it every day unless it's really, really hot, and I'll explain to you why in just a moment. But getting back to this planting the seeds, I wait until the garden area is about 60 degrees on average or higher before I plant the seeds. And then it usually takes about 10 to 14 days before it starts sprouting. And then I make sure that it's in my garden area that gets full sun. And when I'm planting the seeds, I'm going maybe about a 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch deep, somewhere in that range. And if you're doing it in a raised bed or trying to space it out, you're going to go ahead and leave about 10 to 16 inches apart. Now, the reason why we want full sun is we want this to be more bushy. Notice how it is getting a little leggy. It's just the way dill is. But if you want it to kind of lean more toward the bushier side, it definitely likes a lot more sun. The less sun it gets and the more indirect sun it gets, the more leggy it's going to get. So if you want it to be as bushy as possible, go ahead and make sure you give it full sun for as long as you can throughout the day. Now it comes to the watering cycle. I don't necessarily need to water this every single day like some of my other plants. It doesn't like, just like anything else, it doesn't like the soil to be completely bone dry, but it grows best if soil is allowed to nearly dry out between waterings. Let me repeat that again. So you don't necessarily have to water it every single day, assuming that the soil does not get bone dry, but you want to give it time where the soil gets nearly dry between waterings. So don't keep it wet and damp on a day-to-day, daily basis. And so give it a little bit of break in between your watering cycles. Now, if you're growing in containers, you should be using a pot no smaller than about 12 inches tall. Now, this one here is an 18-inch pot, and so it's perfectly fine. Like many things, the roots do work and grow pretty in-depthly for even the smallest things. And so make sure you give it enough space so that it can kind of thrive. And so try to use a pot at least that's going to give you at least 12 inches in depth. And that's a little bit about growing dill. There's not a lot to it. There's a lot of uses for it. I know some people haven't used dill too much and haven't really figured out exactly why or what they're going to use dill with. I would suggest if you're growing dill for the very first time, make it some fresh dill sauce and dill dressing, and that's a really good way to start. And it's very, very easy also to can your cucumbers, the pickling cucumbers, into pickles. And what I'm going to do is the next time I make some pickling cucumbers, I'm going to show you how easy it is. You don't have to buy any fancy jars. Yes, I do have mason jars, but I can also take any old jars that I have, whether it's my like jam jars or if I have some jars left over from buying some canned sauces. I can take those jars, run them through the dishwasher, and I can use them for my pickling cucumbers. And of course, you're going to need dill in order to make pickling cucumbers. So those are some of the options available to you with dill. And I'll try to put in some recipes here as we get later through the year, so that way I can show you what I'm using my dill for and some easy recipes that you can follow along with that. So that's a little bit about how to grow dill and how to take care of dill. If you have any questions, just let me know.